Hi everyone, and welcome to the Canvas Gradebook webinar. This is Jenny McGee, and I'm an instructional designer in the e-learning division at Camden County College. And we're going to be just going over basically how to manage your gradebook, set it up, the different settings in the gradebook, and there will be some time at the end for some questions. So real quickly, our agenda for today, we're going to start out with the assignments tab, because the assignments tab is where you do really the bulk of your work in setting up the gradebook at the beginning of a semester, where you'll set your weighted groups up, and then it's also how you actually create columns in the gradebook where you can enter grades for an assignment. And then we'll look at the grades tab itself and look at how you can set up your grading policies for the semester. Obviously, the basics of entering grades and setting statuses for an individual assignment. We'll look at the settings for assignments and then the different options that you have for the way that you view your gradebook and some other things. So I'm going to go ahead and get into Canvas. And by the way, this webinar is being recorded, and if you missed any webinars from this series or any of the ones that we have done throughout this semester, you can access all of them at the Canvas Faculty Hub. If you have not been added to the Canvas Faculty Hub, please send me an email. That information will be at the end, and I'd be happy to add you to the Canvas Faculty Hub, assuming that you do have a Canvas account. But this is where you'll find all of our recorded webinars, as well as videos and tutorials that we've created on the gradebook. So if you need some additional support or a reminder, this is a great place to go for that. So we're in a fake course today that I use for my training purposes. And as I mentioned, we are going to begin in the assignments tab. Note that I have the assignments tab hidden from students. I want my students to have to access their assignments through the modules, but I still need to click on it in order to view my assignments and my weighted groups. So of course, this is where you would go when you create an assignment. But for our purposes today, what we're going to do is look at how we can set up weighted groups. So as far as I know, there are really two ways that you can set up your grading for a course. And that is either by just using straight points. So there's a certain amount of points that are available for a semester, 1,000 points, and then the students earn points, and then however many they get, you divide by the total number, and that's how you get their grade. So that's probably maybe the most straightforward way, but most people use what Canvas calls weighted groups, which means that you assign different weights to different types of graded items. So for example, you might have your exams worth 60%, all the 60% of the weight of the course is given to exam points. Participation might be worth 20%, and so on. And so what I'm going to start with here is showing you how to set up your weighted groups for your course. And this is actually, as I said, done in the assignments tab, not in the gradebook, but I do think it's important to show that because it has a huge effect on how your grades are calculated. So in the assignments tab, you will see when you first click on it, as I'm sure you've noticed since you've been using Canvas all semester, you will see that you have a group already there that is called assignments. And that is there by default. You have to have at least one group in your assignments tab, whether or not you're using weighted groups. So I am going to come here and I'm going to add as many groups as I need. So if you have a group called assignments, you can just leave this here. If not, you could either change the name of the group or you can delete it after you've added another group here. So I'm going to just go through, and everybody has different groups. So this is just sort of an example of what you might have. You might have a group called homework. And as you can see, I've already typed these in before, which is the only reason they're listed, but you can call your groups whatever you would like. And let me do one more called tests here. So I'm going to use these groups again with the group called assignments if I wanted to at this point. Now that I have additional groups here, I could either edit it and edit the name, or I could just delete it if I wanted to. But I'm going to leave it there because I'll use it for my example here. So now that I have all of my groups listed, now I need to assign them weights. So the way that I do that is by clicking on the 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner next to the Add Assignment button. Canvas calls this a kebab, so I use that term sometimes too. So we'll click on our kebab and we'll click this Assignment Groups Weight button here. And then we just need to check this box that says weight final grade based on assignment group. So I'm going to go ahead and check that box. And now it's going to pull up all of the groups that I've created. And now I can go in and assign them weights. Again, you may not run your course this way, which is fine. You don't have to set this up. But if you do assign more weight to some groups than others, then you can do that here. So I'm just going to let me do 10% for participation and then 30% for tests. Again, everybody does it differently. I'll click save. And now you can see that you've got your weighted groups here. So I've already got some assignments in here. And now that I have my groups, I can actually just drag and drop my assignments into the categories where I want them to go. If you don't have assignments, as you create an assignment or a quiz or a discussion, anything graded, part of that process is it's going to ask you what weighted group you want to put it into. And so you'll designate where each of those items go. So when I click on my grades tab now, you'll see that we've got a couple of different things here. So we have a column for each of the assignments that I've created, and these I've created beforehand. And then we have a column for each of our weighted groups. So one important thing to note is that the weighted groups columns cannot be edited manually. So I can't just come in here and say, I'm going to put my student's participation grade right here in my weighted groups column. It's not set up that way. The weighted groups columns are set up to show the average of what the students have in that particular group. So right now I have, I think, a grade for 1 test in here. So right now the groups, the test group is just going to show the average or just that same score, since I only have 1 score in right now. Once I add another test score in, it's going to average that automatically. Oop, this is out of 0, so let me delete that. But it'll average that in automatically as you go. So this can sometimes cause confusion when someone's trying to put in a grade directly in here. You cannot enter those grades directly into the weighted groups column. What you would need to do is make sure that you have an assignment in there so that you can add grades directly into that assignment column. So to do that, I'm going to go back into my assignments tab. Now let's say that for my participation, I don't have something that my students are turning in and they're getting a direct participation grade. Let's say this is just based on what I've seen them do for the semester, and I've just or I have some kind of metric by which I'm judging their level of participation, and I just want to put that score into the gradebook. So what I'm going to need to do is add an assignment to this participation group in order to create a column in the gradebook where I can put their grade. So I'm going to click on this plus sign here within this group, and I'm just going to leave this as an assignment because it doesn't really matter. All I'm doing here is creating a gradebook column to enter a grade. And I'm just going to call this participation again. I really don't need a due date. You could put one in if you wanted to, but this is just going to be something that I maybe would be cumulative at the end. And then I would need to give it points if this is going to have a weight to it. In order to be able to add points to an assignment, it has to be published. So I'm going to go ahead and click Save and Publish. And now again, this isn't set up so that the students can turn anything in for this assignment. The students will be able to see there is something in there called participation. It is worth 100 points, but there's not anywhere that they're going to have to turn anything in for this. So just as a note, once we eventually someday go back to being back on campus and having face-to-face assignments, maybe tests that you're grading by hand, if you're wanting to create a column in the gradebook just for those types of items that students did not turn in on Canvas, you would do the same thing. So you could just click the plus sign, give it a name, and give it a point value, and then that will create your gradebook column so that you can enter those grades into the gradebook. So now that I have my participation grade, I'm going to go ahead and click on my grades tab again. And I can go ahead and put my score in, and then you'll see over on the right that is going to reflect the average of the participation scores, which happens to just be one assignment at this point. So I'm going to pause there, and if anyone has any questions about weighted groups or using the assignments tab to create gradebook columns, go ahead and type that into the chat question area, and I'd be happy to answer that, or if you have any questions about anything we've gone over so far. So a lot of the time, you'll have created your assignments that you want your students to do. You'll have created your discussions, your quizzes, whatever it is that you're using for points. And those items are that's going to create columns in your gradebook automatically. So this is just if you're wanting to create a column in the gradebook for an item that wasn't turned in through Canvas. Okay, so I'm not seeing any questions coming through, so we will go ahead and move on to our gradebook and our gradebook settings. So I want to just start here. I'm just going to kind of go through these drop-down menus at the top, and we'll go through each of those items first. So this first drop-down menu, the gradebook, this is where you can switch from the individual view, so an individual student, and then back to your, if you are an individual view, you'll come back up here to go back into your whole class view of your gradebook. So I'm going to click on that, and sometimes for whatever reason, and it's doing it right now, I have to click it twice. I'm not really sure why that, and it'll probably do that again when I go back to go to the whole class view. It's a little annoying, but you can get back in here. And then you could just come in and select an individual student, and you can view his grades. And this is a little more like what it looks like to the students. Obviously, students can't see other students' grades, and their grade is more in a linear, a vertical format, where they've got all their grades, and then they have their score. And you also could just look at an individual assignment if you wanted to, and that will show the individual assignment score, which he does not have a score for this. So to get back into my gradebook view, I would come back up in the upper right-hand corner and click Gradebook, and it's probably going to make me do it again. No, it worked that time. You'll also notice sometimes, for whatever reason, the screen can be a little slow to catch up. So if you're noticing that you've put grades in and you know they're in there, you just put them in, or you put them in SpeedGrader and you're not seeing them immediately in the gradebook, click the refresh button, because they'll be stored in there, but for whatever reason, there's sometimes a little bit of a lag time in Canvas in different places when you're changing information. It is registering and saving it. It's just for whatever reason taking a little bit of time to show up on your screen. The other thing I want to show you from this gradebook drop-down menu is the gradebook history. So this is nice because if you had a question, or maybe let's say you accidentally typed something in the wrong column, you realize that you changed somebody's grade, the wrong student's grade or something like that, you can actually click on that gradebook history. You can search by the student. You can do a start date and date if you have a lot of grades or a lot of changes to search, or you could just scroll down. So I could see if there's anything that I have changed. So what was it before, and then what is it after? So that's a nice way to kind of see if you think that you may have accidentally changed somebody's grade inadvertently. You can always come in and look at the gradebook history and see any changes that you've made. So I'm going to click back on my grades tab. All right, by the way, you'll also notice quickly just that your left-hand navigation menu disappears when you are in your gradebook view, I guess just to kind of give you more space to view the gradebook, but you can always bring it back up by clicking this little hamburger icon up at the top. That'll bring your icon back up, and I can click it again to make it disappear again. So I'm going to move on now to this view button. So there's a lot of different ways that you can choose to organize your gradebook. So sometimes it's going to not really make a lot of sense the way that the way that it appears by default. So what a lot of people like to do is maybe do the newest to oldest due date, which means the most recently due assignments are going to be at the front, and then it's going to move the rest, they're going to be in reverse chronological order. But there's a lot of different ways that you could choose to organize your columns, and you might want to change that depending on what you're doing. When we get to filters, you can actually filter out your assignment group. So if you had, I don't think I have any in here. Let's see. Oh, I do. So this will pull up your different assignment groups. So for participation, I only have that one assignment. So it's only going to pull up that participation grade, or I can put it back to all assignments. The other thing you can do for filters, and I don't have this here, but if you have more than one course or more than one section combined into one shell, then you'll see a filter for sections. So, and you can click on that, and just like this assignment groups box popped up here, or drop-down menu popped up here, you'll see a sections drop-down menu pop up, and that will allow you to look at one section of students at a time, which is sometimes helpful for entering grades. This next item here is where you can set up your statuses, and I'll show you a little more about what that is when we look in a second at entering grades. But you can assign a status to an individual assignment. So if I click on statuses, these are the default statuses. So I could mark something as being late, or it'll be marked automatically as late by the system if there's a due date and the student turns something in after that due date. You can mark something as missing, resubmitted, dropped, excused, and you can change the colors if you want to click on the kebab. There's not a lot of great colors. They're kind of pastel. If you have the number for a particular color that you've looked up, you can put that in as well. But they have to kind of be light so that you can read the grade through the color. But you could always change them if you wanted to. And then there is a notes column here that is not visible by default. If you want to turn that on, you can click on view and then click on the notes column. And then that's going to give you a place, really it's the only place in Canvas that you can write notes about an individual student. Students, obviously, they're not going to see the notes column, and they're not going to see any your notes about them. But if you wanted to mention something about it, something that happened with the student, or make a comment to remind yourself of something later, you can click on that notes column. If you come down here to these two little diagonal lines, you can expand it. So if you've got a bunch of typing that you need to do, you can always make it bigger. And then that will show up here at the front. If I want to make it go away again, I can always click that notes again, and it'll make it go away. And then finally, by default, you'll have your unpublished assignments showing up in your gradebook, which can, if you have a lot of unpublished assignments, it can create a lot of clutter. So to remove those, click on View, come down and click the Unpublished Assignments to uncheck it. And that will remove any assignments that are not published from your gradebook view. It does not delete them or remove them from the course, but you just don't have to scroll through them when you're trying to look at your grades. And then finally, we'll look at the actions here. So if you wanted to export a copy of your grades in Excel, it is, I will tell you right off the bat that it is not a great format. It's not really user-friendly. It's kind of hard to read, but if you wanted to just have it, just so that you have it to save, you can do that as well. There's also a way that you can import grades, and you can download a template that you can input. But honestly, for most of the time, and there may be some unique situations, but I think it's probably just easier to just put the grades in the gradebook. But if you wanted to do it this way, there is a certain way that the file needs to be set up in order for you to be able to import that into the gradebook so that Canvas can read it and insert that data in there. Okay, so we're gonna pause there for a minute, and I'll ask if there's any questions about any of these settings in these drop-down menus. And then we're gonna move down to the settings for the individual columns. So you'll see whenever you hover over it, most of these columns, not all of them, you will see this kebab show up at the top. And these are additional settings for these individual columns. So the student name column, there's a couple of things that you can do here. So if I click on this kebab, I can sort these. So if I wanted them to go in reverse alphabetical order, if I wanted to use their SysID instead of their name, maybe it's in order to look at grades anonymously or something like that. There's different ways that I can set that up. I can also change it from first last to last first. And again, I can show other information in addition to their name if I would choose. I will say that down here it says show inactive enrollments or concluded enrollments. That does not actually, the way our system is set up, that does not actually work anymore. I guess there's been some changes in the way that students are, of what happens in Canvas when a student drops a class. So this doesn't actually do anything anymore. If I go to my total column kebab, you can move your total column. So by default, the total column is going to be at the very end of the gradebook, which can kind of be a little, if you've got a lot of assignments, you may want to move it to the front so that it's the first thing that you see, but that's up to you. I'll go ahead and move it back. And then for individual assignments, you've also got different options here. So again, you could sort these assignments instead of by the student name. Basically, they're going from low to high. You could look at any missing assignments so you can immediately see who has to turn something in or who was late. You can go to the speed grader for that assignment, and that will take you into speed grader. One thing that I do really like about one option here, so you can click on this message students who, and this is going to message students who fall into one of these categories. So haven't submitted yet, if it's missing, you can send them a message and say, hey, this assignment hasn't been turned in yet. It's worth, however many points, please get it turned in. Students don't know that other people are getting this message. You could also do for scored less than a certain amount, or if you want to give them kudos for scoring more than a certain amount, and so on. So it's kind of a nice way to reach out to students individually. Looks like individually, but it takes a little bit less time than sending out individual messages. This curve grades option, I would not recommend. It's very complicated, and they kind of give you a little bit of information here on what to do, but I've looked into it and it is a little difficult to figure out what to put in here. There's sort of a whole mathematical equation. And if you want additional information on that, I can always send that to you. You could set a default grade. So if you have a lot of students that scored a 0 or scored 100 and you want to click that set default grade, you can go ahead and put that in, and it'll put any grades in for anybody that don't have another score in there. You can hide the grades. So this is going to hide the grades from the students. Now these grades have already posted, so this would this is going to hide it from them. They're not going to be able to see their grade while it's hidden. And when I do that, I'm going to see a little icon pop up at the top that looks like a little eyeball with a line through it. And then I'll know that that means that the grades are hidden. So in order to allow the students to see the grades, I'll click Post Grades, and that will allow the students to see the grades. If it's an assignment that has files associated with it, you can download the files here. And then this is also where you can set your grade posting policy before you have entered any grades in. And this is what I recommend doing. If you're wanting to hide grades that you haven't entered yet, I would recommend clicking here and switching to manually. And that means that the grades for this assignment are going to be hidden by default, and then any grades that you put in are not going to be visible to students until you come back in and click Post Grades. So I come back here, there has a manual word here, and then I would need to go in, and it's already posted these grades, but click Post Grades, and then that'll make it visible to students. So I'm going to pause here for a second because I do see that I have a question. Okay, so the question is, what happens to the grades at the end of the class? So the grades are stored, and I apologize if I'm not actually answering what you meant. Feel free to add to that. The grades are archived, so you can always get to your past classes at any time. If you click on Courses, and then click on All Courses down at the bottom, you will see a list of all of your past courses. They're read-only at the conclusion of the semester, but you can always get back in there, and the student grades are all saved. All their assignments and everything are saved so that you have a record of all of the student work. Eventually, I believe for fall 2021, this was planned to, I think, happen earlier, but with COVID, everything kind of got pushed back. But Canvas will be the way officially that you will submit your grades. And that has not happened yet. Again, with just everything being so hectic, that wasn't something that they wanted to add to everyone's plate to have to figure that out. But that will eventually be the way that you'll submit grades. You'll put your grades into the gradebook in Canvas, and then at the end of the semester, you'll submit them through Canvas, and they will actually send them over to the student information system. So that's probably more information than you wanted, but hopefully that answered your question. Okay, any other questions about the settings for the individual assignments? Go ahead and type that into the chat area. Okay, so let's look at what happens when you put in your actual grades. And we'll come back here for, we'll do this item here. So when you click on the column, you can, of course, go ahead and put your grades in there. You can also put them directly into SpeedGrader. If I click on the assignment, I can click on SpeedGrader, and that's going to allow me to see the grades or the submissions for the individual items. So for example, I'm not going to spend too much time in here because this is kind of another webinar, but if I'm putting grades into SpeedGrader, they're going to automatically go into the gradebook. So what I'm kind of showing you is if you're entering grades manually into the gradebook rather than using SpeedGrader. So I gave this student has a 23 out of 25. And again, you'll see that the average column is going to automatically adjust as I'm putting the grades in. The other thing that you can do from here is you can click on this little box with an arrow in it, and that's going to pull up a menu where you can assign more information. So you can assign a status. I showed you the statuses earlier. And so if the student has, if this assignment has a due date and the student has not turned it in yet, it's going to be marked as missing automatically if it's assignment that's being turned in through Canvas. And then once it's turned in, it'll be changed from missing to late if it's after that due date. You can always come in and change that to excused if you would like to. Now, if I change this to late, it's going to ask me how many days late it is, and there's a reason for that because I have set up a late penalty of 10% per day for every day that the item is late. And so it's going to do that automatically. So it's going to show the student, you would have had this grade, 23, but because it was late, this is the grade that you actually have. And then that creates a record for me as well to know that this item was late. You can also leave a comment on the assignment that will be sent to the student. This will be seen by the student down here, and that will be they'll be able to see your feedback for them. So the next thing I want to show you is how to set up those grade policies. And so that is going to be done in this gear, I guess, whatever you want to call that, in the upper right-hand corner. This is one thing that does not copy over from semester to semester. So if you will have to come in at the beginning of the semester and set up your grade policies if you do use these. So by default, none of these things are checked. This is something that you would need to come in and do. I highly recommend automatically applying a 0 for missing submissions. The reason for that is you have to go in and put zeros in for things that the students are missing otherwise. And it does not factor the missing assignments in when it's calculating a grade unless it has that 0 in there. So for example, if this student here has nothing in this, they just have this dash in here. Right now, this quiz that they're missing is not counting against them. They've got a 92.14. If I put a 0 in here, that's going to definitely change that grade. So what happens is sometimes students have an inflated idea of what their grade is because a lot of instructors don't put the zeros in until maybe toward the end of the semester to fill that in. But if you have that grade policy set, that's going to automatically put that 0 in there for anything that's missing. You can always override that, or you can override it in SpeedGrader if the student turns the item in, but this at least will let the students know what their actual grade is because it's factoring those zeros in. You can also automatically apply a deduction to items that are late, and that's what I showed you just a minute ago. So I can check this box, and then you can really apply whatever late submission you would like. So you could do 10%, 5%, whatever you want. You could do it per day or per hour, depending on how specific you want it to be. And Canvas will calculate that automatically for any items turned in through Canvas. If it's a manually entered grade from something that wasn't turned in through Canvas, you'll have to do that yourself. And then you can also set a floor so that it's not going to drop below this amount. So the student will get something if they turn it in. And again, you can always override any of these individually. But I definitely do recommend this. This will save you from having to go in and put zeros in for all the missing assignments. And then I'm going to skip over grade posting policy, setting up um, setting this up for the whole semester can be very confusing. I would recommend that if you want to hide an assignment, that you do that through the settings for that individual assignment. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this third column, Advanced. So this is not checked by default. Just like you don't have any control over editing the numbers that are in the weighted groups columns, you don't have any ability to edit the number that is in that total column. So if you want to be able to have some control over that, you will need to come in here and check this box and then click update so that it will save those settings. So I'll show you what I mean by that. The override column here. So let's say I don't have any good examples here the way that these are working out, but if I had somebody that maybe had an 89.9%, Canvas is going to give that person a B, because that's by Camden County College's grading scale. That's what they have. It doesn't round up for you. So if you wanted to give that person a 90 to make sure that they had that grade, you would need to come into the override column and give them that 90. And this might not matter so much right now, but once we do use Canvas as our way of officially submitting grades, this is going to probably get a whole lot more use, because this is going to be where the official grade is coming from. So you can come in here only for the grades that you want to override. The grades you want to keep, you'll just leave that blank. The student won't see that there was anything overridden. They're just going to see their total grade as whatever you have put into the override column. So I do recommend just turning that on in case you need it. You may not need it at all, but if you do, that way it gives you a little bit more control. So if you have any questions about actually anything so far with the gradebook, I'm going to show you one more thing that's related to the gradebook. It's not actually in the gradebook, but it is one thing that I do want to show you. But if there's anything, any questions about the gradebook itself, any of the settings or anything like that we've gone over, feel free to type that into the chat. And then we'll also have some time in a couple of minutes for any additional questions that you may have. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of the gradebook here. I do want to show you how to set up a grading scheme. Choose a grading scheme for your course. So you'll notice here, I don't have any letter, oops, I don't know what I just did here. I don't have any letter grades associated with this. This is just showing my students a percent. By the way, it will show if you have any weighted groups that are worth 0, or you have any weighted groups with no assignments in them, like I don't have anything in my homework column here, you'll see this exclamation point that's showing that I don't have any, it's not including anything from the homework column. So sometimes people panic there's something wrong, but that's just letting me know nothing is coming yet from this 20% because I don't have anything in that group. So let's go ahead and go into the settings, because that's where we will set up our grading scheme. So if I click on settings and click on course details, and that's usually where it is when you first click on it. And if I scroll down, I'm looking for on the left-hand side where it says grading scheme. In order to associate letter grades automatically with your scores, you'll need to check this box that says enable course grading scheme. The one that is in there by default is not one that we use. So, and unfortunately, for whatever reason, Canvas does not allow us to enact a default grading scheme that's different from the one they have. So if I click on this set grading scheme link, you can see the one that's in there by default uses pluses and minuses, which Camden County College does not use. So what you'll need to do is click on select another scheme. And I believe I have set up grading schemes. There's some departments that have different grading schemes, but I think I have all of them in here. If anyone has one used by their department, that you're not seeing, you can always have your department chair send me an email, and I'll be happy to, and let me know what it is, and I'll be happy to use that one. Most departments will use this CCC standard, which is the 90 to 100 is an A, and less than 90 to 80 is a B, and so on. So I would just need to check this or click on this, use this grading standard, and then click done. And then when I click on my grade tab now, you'll see that there is a letter grade associated with each of your scores. So you don't have to do that, but if you would like to allow your students to see what their current grade is, then you will need to go in there and set up a grading scheme for your course. So that is what I have for you today. But I am going to hang around for another couple of minutes in case there are any questions about anything with the grading or the grade book. If you don't have any questions, I want to say thanks so much for joining me this afternoon. Please stay safe and healthy, and I hope everyone has a great winter break. Let me put up quickly our contact information in case anybody does not have it. So you can always contact me and Rose and our Associate Dean, Dr. Chad, by emailing to Distance Learning email address. That's a great way to get to all of us at the same time, and it's a fast way to get feedback or get help if you need it.